Hi, this is Tharwa Wasfi, a student at LET Learning Education and Technology Master's Program, University of Oulu. In this video presentation, I'm going to describe two concepts from each article and one ICE note from each article as well. So I'm going to be dealing with the three different articles: assignment and the definition, then the ICE note, and then the reflection at the end of this presentation. So let's go through the first article. In article number 1, written by Butler, the two different concepts that I'm going to be discussing are the task interpretation and the structuring the instruction. The first one, I'm going to be discussing the definition mainly and the ICE note, and the second concept, it will be just the definition. So let's get started. Task interpretation. The concept definition itself is a little bit broad, but here Butler is specific in terms of a model in which he suggests that the task interpretation is a joint function of students' metacognitive knowledge about the task and their concepts about the task, and also their concepts about the nature of the academic work and how well students actively and strategically focus attention on deciphering task demands. As you can see, the definition is tackling three different areas: the metacognitive knowledge, the conceptions about the nature of the academic work, and also the strategic focus of the attention, the academic work itself. Now, my thinking is that he already began by clarifying the relationship between metacognitive knowledge and concepts or conceptions about the task, and somehow these seem very much the same for me. Like the conceptions about the task, they are still metacognitive knowledge. It's knowledge about knowledge, thinking about thinking. But he's trying to draw the line between the stereotypical generalizations as conceptions and the metacognitive knowledge as anything else. So that's the first thing, is that the examples are also, somehow very shallow, because it doesn't deal with the task as something has to do with technicalities of the subject or the kind of work. When you think of mathematics and history and geography and languages, they're really different subjects, and for each subject there are hundreds of tasks, and each task has a lot of technicalities that impose a lot when it comes to interpretation. But he didn't tackle any of this. So namely, the topics are very general and very generic. So there was no mention, he mentioned the writing tasks, but still writing is a little bit narrow topic to use it as an example and then generalize all the task interpretation technicalities as being that's how it should work. But again, I'm still thinking, what are the context of this description of the task interpretation? So the technical knowledge about certain subjects is missing, and the application of the theory is also missing from practice. It does seem that there is so much theory and discussion about metacognition, conceptions and conceptualizations, but there is very little to do with practice and applications and examples. Even the examples that were provided, they didn't touch on an actual task that involve a big challenge in interpretation, so that we can get to know exactly how does the metacognitive knowledge and the conceptions about the task will influence the interpretation. So the tasks are a bit not really something that I can look at in depth and understand. So the second concept I'm going to be talking about here is structuring the instruction. First of all, the concept definition. According to Butler, he recommended that teachers should provide instruction explicitly focused on promoting metacognitive knowledge and productive task conceptions and students' development of effective strategies for completing academic work. Again, structuring the instruction would also be more into technicalities of the task, as I mentioned previously. But here, these are kind of very general and generic definition for structuring the instruction. It didn't deal with the structuring itself, the idea of structuring and the organizational aspect of structuring and how would you build a structure. He didn't mention that at all. His definition is about the promoting the metacognition and metacognitive knowledge and conceptions about the tasks, but kind of ignoring the structuring part. But he's kind of hinting that structuring should be part of the metacognitive aspect. But anyway, I'm still looking at structuring as a strategic approach for delivering instruction that has to be dealt with in terms of each subject separately. So that's for the article number 1. In the second article, article 2, I'm going to be discussing 2 different concepts: learning strategies and rehearsal strategies. And definition and ice note will be for the first concept only. Learning strategies is one of my favorite topics, in which I was researching and reading for 6 months. 2 years ago, as I was writing a book about the action-based learning strategies for learning how to speak foreign languages, and I had to read a lot of papers on this topic, and they were really kind of very much into theory as well, and very little to do with practice. The concept itself, Weinstein et al. He said that it's difficult to define it because there is no standard definition, and that's true in the field of study. So I had to look up some other research papers and then come up with, let's say, a very common definition, which is by Jasmina Hasanbegovic. She explains that learning strategies refer to students' self-generated thoughts, feelings, and actions which are systematically oriented toward attainment of their goals. Now, this definition is very common, as a lot of other researchers mention the thoughts and feeling parts next to the actions. And the reason why I picked on this definition, because I wanted to mention in the ice note that the lack of standard definition has really caused the difficulty in a lot of aspects in research when it comes to learning strategies. So some of them is the interaction with everything else except the subject matter. When people think of learning strategies, they keep picking on psychological, behavioral, cognition activities, and then they relate it to the environment, but they rarely mention the subject itself or the material, which is really a big deal and part of the strategies. It influences the strategies and the action that learners take to learn. So they deal with the interaction in the learning strategies research papers is dealing with everything else except the material, the subject course. And the involvement of thoughts and feelings is a bit complicated and somehow is indirect and indirectly related to learning strategies. Is more of subconscious processes happening inside people's brain or their emotions. So it's hard to take it as part of the learning strategies. For me, I always look at the actions. Learning strategies has to deal with mainly the actions that learners take to learn, because it's hard for learners to consciously select their feelings and their thoughts and action at the same time. Most of the time, the feelings and thoughts just occur. They're triggered by the environment, and the action is taken by the learner. Now, when it comes to tools versus activities and strategies, I had an interesting discussion with Professor Andrew Cohen, one of the famous researchers in the field of learning strategies, over Skype, and we agreed together that tools are mistaken to be strategies in the research field, because a lot of researchers wrote that tools like using dictionary as a strategy. And there are some simple activities that are also classified as strategies. So I think the academic, in the learning strategies field, is trying to broadly incorporate anything that happens in the environment, whether inside the learner's brain, heart, outside of them, as part of the strategy. And for somehow there are so many, these variables should be excluded for a while so that we can focus on the actual systematic actions and behaviors that learners use to organize their learning as a strategic planning thing. So that's my thinking when I look at learning strategies. There should be more specific research in the field. Rehearsal strategies. The definition here is quite clear. Rehearsal is about repetition, repetitive exposure to what the student is trying to learn. And Weinstein gave examples that including repeating a definition over and over, using flashcards, listening over and over. That's quite good definition to let's say explain what it means rehearsal strategies. So I think the definition here is clear. Now, article number 3, I'm going to be discussing two different concepts: metacognition versus self-regulated and self-regulated learning with the ICE note, and then prompting and cueing. First concept, the concept difference is not necessarily definitions because they are kind of overlapping somehow. The difference is Densmore mentions here is that the metacognitive, between the metacognitive self-regulated and self-regulated learning, lies in what is being monitored or controlled. So he mentioned that in self-regulation and self-regulated learning, monitoring and control is referring to behavior, cognition, or motivation, while in metacognition, he emphasizes that, or he mentioned that it emphasizes monitoring and controlling of cognition. Specifically, I still see that there is kind of constructs are overlapping in a way that still, well, both of them involve monitoring and control, and then the focus on the academic learning is only part of the self, or should only be part of the self-regulated learning, because metacognition is really very broad area of research, not only study. I mean, a study and research as well. Monitoring thoughts and action is a bit interesting part to look at it, but I see that self-regulation is not just monitoring and controlling. There is much more than that. There is this self-discipline part that plays a big part of it, and there is this behavioral thing of habitual patterns of behavior that happens to people when they get used to, let's say, doing certain things to make their learning much easier. For example, pick up the phone and talking to their colleagues to get some advices and just learn from what other people have done. It becomes a habit. So there is much more than monitoring thoughts and evaluating. I mean, in self-regulation, there is so much to say on different things that learners do to regulate their learning, not just monitoring and controlling, which is, it seems like the trend. Everything has to do with monitoring and controlling in the research area. Also, the environment triggers a lot of reactions from learners and force them sometimes to get to do or to take metacognitive actions or to have metacognitive activities. So not just metacognition, it's not not always conscious activity. Sometimes the teacher asks learners about their understanding of the task, and that's promoting metacognitive knowledge. So the environment itself triggers sometimes the metacognition, not the students themselves consciously go into the mode of let's learn about the task. So it's not always conscious action from the learner's part. The environment plays also a big part of it. Second concept is prompting and cueing. As Densmore here explains that, well, he didn't explain what is prompting and cueing in details. He just said that this is kind of scaffolding, and it has introduced a layer of complexity in many of these studies when it comes to the use of the hypermedia in computer-based learning environments. But for me, to understand really prompting and cueing, because I understand these words, I wanted to find a definition. I had to Google until I came across Google a lot of information. I came across an interesting article written by Texas Education Agency in 2011. And here they mention in this paper the difference between the cueing, which is just a hint. It doesn't lead the student to a direct answer, where the prompt is much more invasive. It takes the student step by step and it leads to a direct answer. So I think here is the definition. I mean, not exactly definition, but the differences between the prompting and cueing. The prompting is more leading towards the answer. Cueing is just a hint. So that's it for this concept. And the reflection part. When I'm thinking about my solo phase planning, how well did I succeed and why? The reading part was quite interesting. I had to spend a huge amount of time reading so that I can pick up the concepts that would challenge my way of thinking and that will make me think of an ideas to connect with the other ideas I have in my mind and then to elaborate. So that was a little bit challenging for me, not the reading part, but the thinking after reading, the metacognitive aspect of it. How well did I succeed? Well, I spent three days working on this task, so I think I managed to do it. I cannot really type very much because of the problem I have in my hand, so I have to record this audio and prepared presentation, which took much more time, but I'm glad I made it. Yeah, the biggest challenge for me is the fact that I had to really choose concepts that would challenge my thinking, concept that would make me bring information that I have already, and concepts that would give me a chance to elaborate more and connect it to in a meaningful way so that I can bring some practice into it in terms of practicalities, not just theories. I think I have a lot to say and a lot to talk about, but because I don't want to make this presentation really long, I managed to deliver on time because the deadline is really difficult given the fact that I have a lot of other studies and other things I'm doing, but I managed. So the deadline was another challenge, but with the challenge of choosing the concepts, I managed to choose the concepts that would challenge me in terms of bringing my knowledge and my previous expertise in delivering and teaching evaluation and things like that, and my research and learning strategies into this presentation. So it took me a while to integrate all of that in the concept definition and the ICE notes. What would I do differently next time? I think I would elaborate more in the ICE notes. I know there is so much to be said, but when I think of 6 different concepts and 3 ICE notes and then the reflection part and the planning, I feel that it's a lot of work and it gets really complicated. So I feel that differently. I would like to elaborate more in the ICE notes, but I don't want to make my presentation too long and boring, so I'd like to keep it as short as possible. Well, that's all. Thank you very much for watching my presentation. This is a task that I had to prepare for one of the subjects, self-regulated learning, as part of the master's program in learning and education technology, University of Oulu. As you can see, so that was very much into academic and research-based assignment. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it and have a nice day.